Last week, we had this moment of victory in the House of Commons. Every single party voted in favor of a Conservative motion that was brought forward, calling for February 22nd to be known as National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And one of the reasons why this is so important is because it allows us the opportunity as a Canadian society to shed light on an issue that is often ignored. Not necessarily because we want to ignore it, but because we assume that it's a thing of the past. We assume that it's something that had to do with an old developing world, not a part of the Canada we know. But that's actually a myth or a misconception. And so the reality is that human trafficking does take place in Canada. It is prevalent, and we do need to understand it better. One of the big things within human trafficking is sexual exploitation. So when we talk about human trafficking in Canada, we're talking about around the world, I should say, we're talking about $150 billion industry. And of that, 90 billion is based on human exploitation for sexual purposes. And so this is something that is really near and dear to my heart and something that I just wanted to take a moment to talk about here today. Again, this is not something that's just overseas in other developing countries, but this is actually something that happens right here in Canada, the place that we call home. You know, human trafficking and specifically, exploitation for sexual purposes, it destroys lives. It ruins potential. It changes people forever. And not just the individual who is impacted directly, but also friends and family members. And so I think it really is worth taking time to understand to a greater extent. It's worth noting that there's actually a direct link between human trafficking and sexual exploitation in the form of pornography. Now, right here in Canada, in Montreal, we have one of the biggest operations in the world, and that is Pornhub. Pornhub functions under the parent company MindGeek. Now, Pornhub is currently under investigation, and they've been studied, or are being studied, I should say, by the Ethics Committee. So a number of witnesses have come forward and talked about their experiences of having videos and photos uploaded to this site without their permission. In other words, Pornhub functions as almost a YouTube for porn. So in other words, people, from the general Canadian public and around the world can take videos or photos that they've taken and upload them. If you happen to be the person that is being uploaded, however, without having given permission, it leaves you feeling incredibly vulnerable, incredibly exploited, and can destroy your life. That's exactly what happened to a young girl. Her name is Serena, and she came forward as the very first witness at Ethics Committee. And she was 14 years old when videos were made of her, and they were uploaded to this site without her permission. She quickly found out that this had been done because she showed up to school one day and was made a mockery of. Her classmates made fun of her. They further exploited her, demanded more photos, more videos, etc., etc. And so she was treated like an object. She was treated incredibly poorly. And as a result of the bullying that then took place, she eventually tried to take her life on a number of occasions, eventually fell prey to drugs and alcohol, eventually ended up homeless, dropped out of school, and now is in this place of young adulthood having to pick up the shambles of her life and put it back together, and is fighting very hard to do so. But of course you can imagine the destruction that has ensued. The sad part is that Serena's only one of many, many, many girls who have had photos and videos uploaded to sites like Pornhub. Girls, boys, young men, women have all been exploited in this capacity. And so at committee, we've heard from a number of these witnesses, again, Serena being the first. One of the reasons why it's so important, I think, for us to stop and recognize that this is a reality in our country is because if we don't first acknowledge it, we actually can't take action. And if we don't take action, then we won't be able to put a stop to it. And so one of the big things that porn companies prey upon is boys, young boys. They try to lure them in at the ages of 8, 9, 10, 11 and get them hooked. Because if they can get them hooked, then they've created demand. And if they can create demand, then they can continue to put the product out there, which happens to be exploitive towards women and girls largely, but the demand continues to perpetuate. And as the demand continues to grow, then of course the industry stays alive and active, and there's a ton of money to be made, as discussed earlier. The point of today is that we would become aware of these realities, that we would go and research further, that we would come to an understanding of what's going on within our own country. And then further to that, that we would have conversations with our friends, our family, our classmates, that we would help information to spread. And that together as a society, we would say this is no longer acceptable. It never was, but now we're taking action against it. We will not allow these behaviors to take place in the nation of Canada. People are meant to be valued. They're meant to be shown worth, dignity, respect, and honor. We will no longer allow them to be exploited. I invite you to join me today and be a part of the solution.